The Mating School by Jonas Mears, chapters 27 and 28. Chapter 27. Ryan and Lily's other missing classmates didn't return for another week. It was Friday, after lunch, and Lily was nearly late arriving at her abilities class. "Sorry I'm late," she said upon entering. She stopped short, seeing the classroom much fuller than it had been for so long. She found herself avoiding eye contact with Ryan. She couldn't be sure why. Her eyes rested instead on a new student, a petite girl. She seemed very proper, with her back straight and legs crossed delicately, but she also gave the impression that she wanted to look smaller than she was. "That's quite all right, Lily. Please have a seat," said Mrs. Harrowstone. "We'll be working on protective mental shields today." Lily nodded while still looking at the new girl. She felt uneasy about her. But the new girl was so tiny and seemed so timid that she couldn't be sure why she'd feel uneasy. Lily was about to look away when the glint of something wrapped around the girl's arms caught her eye. They were a kind of delicate chain. They crisscrossed geometrically from her hands to her elbow. Not wanting to draw attention to herself, Lily took the only remaining seat, which happened to be by Ryan. As she moved towards it, she instinctively didn't turn her back to the new girl. And yet, Lily knew she ought not to judge the girl when they'd never even spoken. It came as no surprise to Lily that she wasn't any good at the energy shields they worked on. Another subpar ability to add to her growing list. Then again, she couldn't be sure if it was because she just wasn't good at this new magic, or if she wasn't able to concentrate because of her uneasiness. The girl approached her near the end of class. Or rather, she approached Ryan, who was seated next to her. "You were right, Ryan," said the girl. "It is much better. Thank you." "Don't mention it," he said in an offhanded way as he stood and settled his satchel onto his shoulder. The girl giggled. It sounded like the tinkling a high-quality, overpriced teacup would make as it shattered on the floor. "Well, aren't you going to introduce me to your friend?" Ryan looked surprised. No doubt he, like Lily, had never thought of themselves as friends. "This is Lily." "Lily. Meet Christy." Lily didn't say anything right away. The tension was stiff like frozen wax. She can't be the only one feeling it. "Hello," she said at last in a bit of a monotone. "Hello," said the girl. She sounded so happy at even just the simplest of responses. "I was wondering if you'd maybe be able to show me to the dining hall. I know we've only just met, but the others are no doubt sick of me after our long travels." Lily looked at Ryan. She wasn't sure why. Maybe she expected him to intervene, but he seemed not to even be paying attention. Now that she looked at him closely, she could see he looked exhausted. "All right," Lily said to the girl. She'd be going there anyway to meet up with Anne and Sophie. It didn't seem like walking with this girl would cause any detriment. What could possibly go wrong? Part 2. "It's amazing," Christy seemed to say around every corner. Arriving on the 4th floor, she practically twirled to see a 360 of the grand hall. "Amazing," she said again. Lily didn't say anything. Her uneasy feeling remained, and yet the girl seemed perfectly sweet. "It's the cobalt," said Christy several minutes later, as if reading Lily's mind. "Cobalt?" said Lily. "It helps me to control my energy," said the girl, who seemed oddly sober compared to moments ago. "It's toxic, you see, and I must spend energy to protect and heal myself from it. A constant energy drain, which means I'm left with a small enough amount that I can control." "Oh," said Lily. She couldn't be sure what she should say. It seemed rather barbaric to her. "What an awful situation. It sounds horrible." "No, I'm lucky mostly. Lucky to have the power, I suppose. And someday I can hope to obtain control of it." "You can take the cobalt off then?" "Well," said Christy, "that's not up to me. But I'd like to think so." Lily wanted to ask who it was up to, and yet she didn't want to pry. They rounded the corner into the dining hall. "Wow, this is incredible," said Christy. "Thank you very much for showing me the way." And with that, she seemed to bound away from Lily, who watched for a moment with intrigue before Anne and Sophie caught up to where Lily stood by the entrance. "You ready?" said Sophie, sounding excited. "Absolutely," said Lily. She needed a night off. Chapter 28. "Christy's a lichen," said Lily. "No way. I think Christy is one too," said Sophie. It was Sunday, and they were gathered around a huge carved wooden table. Anne was organizing a stack of books at one end. "Yeah, but wasn't it only males that can be lichen?" said Lily. "You really should finish reading this book," said Anne, sliding a copy of The Return of the Lichens towards them. "Could be interesting, I guess," said Lily, flipping it open. "That reminds me, did you ever figure out who Miss Art was?" Said Anne, sounding a bit nonplussed. "It's hard to say just yet." Lily looked up from the book. Hard to say? What was hard about it, she wondered. What about the stuff Irene said? You told her that it wasn't my fault and that I didn't know. What don't I know? Sophie looked up from the book she'd been reading, curious about what Anne might say. Well, isn't it obvious? Lily considered this and decided that clearly it wasn't obvious. She felt frustrated with Anne. What was she hiding from her? "Maybe you could just tell me," said Lily at last. Anne was quiet for a long minute. She looked uncomfortable. I wish I could, Lily, but I'm not allowed." "Not allowed by who?" said Sophie. "I'm not at liberty to disclose such information," said Anne. Part 2. Lily felt herself becoming more removed from Anne. She wasn't sure why, except that she felt like she was betrayed by her in some way. Despite the time they'd spent together, she felt like she couldn't be sure how well she knew Anne. They'd met on the car ride to the train station that would take them to school, part of her pack. And yet, she started to wonder if that was the case. She'd never seen Anne before that day. It seemed, given her work as a maid, that she would have seen her before that journey. Then again, it was a big pack. Maybe it was possible? Lily thought about the day she first shifted when Anne found her in the woods. She had howled, and someone had howled back in answer. Who? Had Anne been sent to find her? Was it possible that Anne had been sent to accompany her on the trip to the school to befriend her? No, she didn't want to think it. She had so many other things to think about anyway, such as Christy being a lichen. Despite her best efforts to avoid believing it, there was too much evidence to ignore the idea. Lily couldn't see why cobalt would be used to control the power of any normal shifter. The information about Christy's arrival was unusual also. She'd never seen anyone else get enrolled so late in the year. And why would 6 students leave to bring her back unless she was a lichen? Maybe for once the rumors had been true, but despite the evidence, Lily was reluctant to believe it. She couldn't be sure why, but she kept thinking that if Christy was a lichen, then... "You going to lunch?" said Sophie, heading towards the door of their dorm room. Lily had been spending more time here. She didn't like to think it was because she was trying to avoid Anne. Their makeshift study sessions had ended, though. "Not today," said Lily. "I'm not feeling very hungry." "Fair enough," said Sophie. "I'll bring you back a sandwich in case you get hungry later." "Thanks, Sophie," said Lily. And as the door clicked closed, she rolled onto her belly on her bed and opened the leather-bound book. She needed answers, and this seemed the only place left to get them. Part 3. "It didn't say a whole lot, really," said Lily. She and Sophie were sitting in an upstairs study room, but they weren't studying. There was a sense of novelty about using a study space just for sitting and chatting. Lily had brought a plate of fruit, cheese, and apples from the dining area. She wasn't sure if that was against the rules, but today she wouldn't have cared if it was. She was feeling more and more as if everything in her life had been a bit too much, and now maybe she just needed to do what she wanted for a while. Rules be damned. She couldn't explain this new defiance even to herself. Did it say anything about the prophecy? Said Sophie. No, but it had information about lichen skills, said Lily. But then again, most of them can be seen in shifters also. The only new information was about female lichens. So Christy could be a lichen, said Sophie, sounding excited. Maybe, said Lily. She didn't know why she was feeling a bit queasy. It talked about how female lichens are different to the males, particularly in development. It said that the power of either gender is about the same. What do you mean, development? Well, it only mentioned a few things, really, about how their animal form, or forms as the case may be, are generally a lighter color compared to general shifters, and the males tend to be darker than shifters in their animal forms. It also said that the females can be late to shift,